Namamishwaram Sachidanandarupam Lasakundalam Gokule Brajamanam Yasorabiyolukaladavamanam Param Rishtamatyanta Drutagopyam Bhutantamunurnetra Yugmam Rijantam Karambuja Jugmena Satam Kanetram Bhosvasakam Patrirekam Kakanta Sitagraivam Damodaram Bhakti-badam Iti Gripalila Viranandam Svagoshimashantam Akyapayantam Tariyeshitageshu Bhaktairjitatvam Punak prematastam sata vrittivande Varam deva moksham na moksham varimva Nachanyam vrineham varesharapiha Idham teva purnata gopalabalam Sada me manasya virashtam kimanyai Hitam te mukam bojam matyantanilai Britam kuntalai snigdaraktai chagopya Mohoshombitam bimbaraktadarang me Manasya virashtam alam lakshalabai Namo deva damodarananta vishno Prasida prabho dukkha jalabdimagnyam Kripa drishti vrishtyati dinam batanu Grihane shamagyamya yakshi drishai Kuberatmajo baddam murtyaiva yadva Tvaya mochito bhakti bhajau krito cha Tata prema bhaktim svakame prayachcha Namo kshigraho mesti damodareha Namaste studhamne spuraktiptidhamne Tvadiyodarayata vishvasya dhamne Namo radikayai tvadiya priyayai Namo nantalilaya devaya tubhyam Namo radikayai tvadiya priyayai Namo nantalilaya devaya tubhyam Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.
Jai. To the Supreme Controller who possesses an eternal form of blissful knowledge, whose glistening earrings swing to and fro, who manifested himself in Gokul, who stole the butter that the gopis kept hanging from the rafters of their storerooms, and who then quickly jumped up in retreat in fear of Mother Jasoda, but was ultimately caught. To that Supreme Lord, Sri Damodar, I offer my humble obeisances.
Seeing the whipping stick in his mother's hand, he cried and rubbed his eyes again and again with his two lotus hands. His eyes were filled with tears, and the necklace of pearls around his neck, which is marked with 3 lines like a conch shell, is shaking because of his quick breathing due to crying. To the Supreme Lord, Sri Damodar, whose belly is bound not with ropes but with his mother's pure love, I offer my humble obeisances.
Those super excellent pastimes. I'm getting an echo. Maybe there's Jai Jagadish is sitting right next to me. Mute yourself and maybe the echo will go away. There we go. Those super excellent pastimes of Lord Krishna's babyhood drown the inhabitants of Gokul in pools of ecstasy. To the devotees who are attracted only to his majestic aspect of Narayan and Vaikuntha, the Lord herein reveals, I am conquered and overwhelmed by pure loving devotion. To the Supreme Lord Damodar, my obeisances hundreds and hundreds of times.
Oh Lord. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Prabhuji. O Lord, although you are able to give all kinds of benedictions, I do not pray to you for liberation, nor eternal life in Vaikuntha, nor any other boon. My only prayer is that your childhood pastimes may constantly appear in my mind. O Lord, I do not even want to know your feature of Paramatma. I simply wish that your childhood pastimes may ever be enacted in my heart.
O Lord, your lotus face, which is encircled by locks of soft black hair tinged with red, is kissed again and again by Mother Yashoda, and your lips are reddish like the bimba fruit. May this beautiful vision of your lotus face be ever manifest in my heart. Thousands and thousands of other benedictions are of no use to me.
O Supreme Godhead, I offer my obeisance unto you. O Damodara, O Ananta, O Vishnu, O Master, O my Lord, be pleased upon me, by showering your glance of mercy upon me, delivering me, this poor ignorant fool, who is immersed in an ocean of worldly sorrows, and become visible to my eyes.
O Lord Damodar, just as the 2 sons of Kavera, Manigriva and Naligavara, were delivered from the curse of Narada, and made into great devotees by you in your form as a baby tied to with a rope to a wooden grinding mortar. In the same way, please give me your own prema bhakti. I only long for this and have no desire for any other kind of liberation.
O Lord Damodara, I first of all offer my obeisances to the brilliantly effulgent robe which binds your belly. I then offer my obeisances to your belly, which is the abode of the entire universe. I humbly bow down to your most beloved Srimati Radharani, and I offer all obeisances to you, the Supreme Lord who displays unlimited pastimes.
Jai Damodar Bhakti Ki Jai.
Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, 23rd chapter, text number 15. Utsarpayang stutam murdni.
Utsarpayang stutam murdni.
Kramena veshya nispriyaha.
Kramena veshya nispriyaha.
Vayum vayau kshitau kayam. Tejas tejasya yujat. Utsarpayam stutam murdni. Kramena veshya nispriyaha. Vayum vayau kshitau kayam. Tejas tejasya yujat.
Utsarpayang stutang mordni.
Utsarpayam stutam mordni.
Kramena veshya nispritaha.
Kramena veshya nispriyaha.
Vayum vayau kshitau kayam.
Vayum vayau kshitau kayam.
Tejas tejasya yujat.
Tejas tejasya yujat.
Utsarpayang stutang murdni.
Utsarpayam stutam mordni.
Kramena veshya nispriyaha.
Kramena veshya nispriyaha.
Vayum vayau kshitau kayam.
Vayum vayau kshitau kayam.
Tejas tejasya yujat.
Tejas tejasya yujat.
Utsarpayang stutang murdni.
Utsarpayam stutam mordni.
Kramena veshya nispriyaha.
Kramena veshya nispriyaha.
Vayum vayau kshitau kayam.
Vayum vayau kshitau kayam.
Tejas tejasya yujayat.
Tejas tejasya yujat. Utsarpayam stutam mordni.
Utsarpayang stutang mordni.
Kramena veshya nispriyaha.
Kramena nispriyaha.
Vayum vayau kshitam kayam.
Vayum vayau kshitau kayam.
Tejas tejasya yujat.
Tejas tejasya yujat.
Utsarpayan. Thus placing. Two but. Tam. The air. Murdni. On the head. Kramena. Gradually. Aveshya. Placing. Nishpriyaha. Being freed from all material desires. Vayum. The air portion of the body. Vayau. In the total air covering the universe.
Covering the universe.
Kshitau. In the total covering of earth.
In the total covering of earth.
Kayam. This material body. Tejaha. The fire in the body. Tejasi. In the total fire of the material covering. Ayuyujat. Mixed. Divine Grace. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. In this way, Prithu Maharaj gradually raised his air of life up to the hole in his skull, whereupon he lost all desire for material existence. Gradually, he merged his air of life with the totality of air, his body with the totality of earth, and the fire within his body with the totality of fire. Report. When the spiritual spark, which is described as 1/10,000th part of the tip of a hair, is forced into material existence, that spark is covered by gross and subtle material elements. The material body is composed of 5 gross elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and 3 subtle elements: mind, intelligence, and ego. When one attains liberation, he is freed from these material coverings. Indeed, success in yoga involves getting free from these material coverings and entering into spiritual existence. Lord Buddha's teachings of nirvana are based on this principle. Lord Buddha instructed his followers to give up these material coverings by means of meditation and yoga. Lord Buddha did not give any information about the soul, but if one follows his instructions strictly, he will ultimately become free from the material coverings and attain nirvana. When a living entity gives up the material coverings, he remains a spirit soul. This spirit soul must enter into the spiritual sky to merge into the Brahman effulgence. Unfortunately, unless the living entity has information of the spiritual world and the Vaikunthas, there is a 99.9% chance of his falling down again into material existence. There is, however, a small chance of being promoted to a spiritual planet from the Brahman effulgence, or the Brahmajyoti. This Brahmajyoti is considered by impersonalists to be without variety, and the Buddhists consider it to be void. In either case, whether one accepts the spiritual sky as being without variety or void, there is none of the spiritual bliss which is enjoyed in the spiritual planet, the Vaikunthas or Krishnaloka. In the absence of varieties of enjoyment, the spirit soul gradually feels an attraction to enjoy a life of bliss. And not having any information of Krishnaloka or Vaikuntha-loka, he naturally falls down to material activities in order to enjoy material varieties. Utsarpayam stutam murni kramena vesha nispriya vayung yayau kshitau kayam tejas tejasya yujat. In this way, Prithu Maharaj gradually raised his air of life up to the hole in his skull, whereupon he lost all desire for material existence. Gradually, he merged his air of life with the totality of air, his body with the totality of earth, and the fire within his body with the totality of fire. Om Jnanatimarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamhayam Dadhati Svapadantikam Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate grim yat kritpadam aham vande Sri Guru Dinataranam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Ishvaram Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. With the blessings of all the Vaishnavas, and Vaishnavis. Here we are discussing the pastime of Prithu Maharaj preparing himself for going back home, back to Godhead. And it is very interesting to see how Prithu Maharaj, who is a Shakti-Avesh avatar, he is the empowered incarnation for ruling, the ruling potency. He's demonstrating so many important teachings to us. Over the past so many chapters, we have learned many lessons from him. And so here, he's teaching us the ultimate lesson. What is that? How to give up this body and this world and to attain the supreme destination, the spiritual realm. So in this verse, it is being described how he is following the mystic yoga process of raising the prana, or the air of life, all the way to the skull, the Brahmarandra. And what happens in this process is that he's losing all desire for material existence. And then he is gradually merging this prana, or this life air, with the totality of air, the body with the totality of earth, and the fire within his body with the totality of fire. Now, if this seems a little technical or a little esoteric, this mystic yoga process is not recommended for bhaktas and not recommended for this age, because we cannot actually follow this yogic process, because we do not have the necessary wherewithal to execute this practice. So, but it is explained here because it was then the process, so that's how he achieved the perfection of life. So what is he doing? He is merging the elements back into their original source. Bhagavad Gita explains, Bhumi Rapo Nalo Vayu Kamano Buddhirevacha Ahankara iti yang me bina prakriti rastada. That there are 5 gross and 3 subtle elements, and as the universe is being created from the most subtle to the most gross, so in a reverse order, he is again merging these elements into their original totality of that element. And in this way, he's relinquishing his gross and subtle body. So this is the process of yoga, and it involves getting free from the material coverings to enter again into spiritual existence. Srila Prabhupada makes the point that Buddha's teachings of nirvana are also based on this principle. That Lord Buddha, he instructed his followers to give up material coverings through the practice of yoga and meditation. And even though he did not actually teach about the spirit soul, still if people follow his instructions strictly, they can attain nirvana, or relinquishing material attachment. Srila Prabhupada goes on to explain a very essential point, that someone who follows this process of mystic yoga, or trying to elevate themselves by separating oneself from the gross and subtle elements, ultimately, unless they achieve attraction for the lotus feet of the Lord, they will again fall down to the material platform. And it's interesting how he says 99.9%. So that's a vast majority. In fact, that's almost everybody. And he is touching on the verse from the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd chapter, text 32. Yenye ravindaksha vimukta maninas tvayasta bhava ravishuddha buddhaya aruya krikshrena parampadam tata patantyado nadrita yusmadangraya. Someone may say that aside from devotees who always seek shelter at the Lord's lotus feet, there are those who are not devotees, but who have accepted different processes for attaining salvation. what happens to them? In answer to this question, Lord Brahman, the other demigod, said, O lotus-eyed Lord, although non-devotees who accept severe austerities and penances to achieve the highest position may think themselves liberated, their intelligence is impure. They fall down from their position of imagined superiority because they have no regard for your lotus feet. So Srila Prabhupada quotes this verse often, and it's an important verse. So what are the key words here that are kind of standing out? It's that they are in their imagined position of superiority. Vimukta manina. So they're liberated only in their own minds. Why? Because they have no regards for the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, they will fall down again from these imagined position of superiority. Also, Kritshrena, they undergo severe austerities, penances, and hard labor. It is quite astounding to see how people are, not so much these days, but in former days, taking up austerity and penances to practice yoga, to practice jnana, severe penances to study the Vedic scriptures. But if it does not ultimately give them an attraction for the lotus feet of the Lord, they will again fall down to the material platform. And why is this so? Because they are not feeling any satisfaction. They're not feeling any happiness in that study, in that practice of yoga. And the soul, being anandamayo vyasat, always seeking for pleasure, always seeking for happiness, if it has been in a situation where there is no happiness, then it will look for something else. It will try to attain a different status, a different experience. And therefore, they naturally fall down to material activities in order to enjoy material varieties. So, in the Gita, in the 18th chapter, Krishna also states in text 54, Brahmabhuta prasannatma na shochati na kankshati samak sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. One who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. He is equally disposed toward every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. So to me, this topic, this theme is really about being joyful. And I have to ask myself, am I joyful in Krishna consciousness or not? Because if not, then I will again seek out other types of varieties of enjoyment. So how can I be joyful? It is only possible if I actually taste this spiritual enjoyment, this spiritual bliss that is available in Krishna consciousness. So what is holding me back from experiencing that natural joyful state is usually if I'm still attached to try to exercise my material propensities. And what are they? Just like here we see that Prithu Maharaj, he has given up material desire. He has lost all desire for material existence. What is the symptom of material existence? The tendency to control and the tendency to enjoy. So if we examine ourselves, we look into our own hearts and we're checking, okay, how much do I still have the tendency to control and to enjoy? It's quite a subtle thing. So like now, with the current scenario, there is a new opportunity for everyone to try to lord it over and to try to control other people's lives. oh, don't stand here, don't stand there, don't come too close, don't do this, don't do that. And so it is quite interesting to see how the conditioned soul, even though lacking real abilities and potency, is still trying to control, is still trying to manipulate others. And it is a very deep, ingrained tendency that is there. And then, of course, what does that controlling potency mean? If I cannot enjoy, if I cannot take pleasure from that, if I cannot gain some gross or subtle sense of imagined superiority, imagined enjoyment, even if it is vicariously. So that self-analysis is very important, because ultimately, if I still feel that there is something for me here left to enjoy or to control, that I still have vested interests, I still have an investment into the material world, I will have to come back in order to cash in. So let us take inventory and ask ourselves, do I still feel that somebody owes me something? And that there is something that I have not yet experienced, that I still need to experience? Then this tendency, this desire, will force us to come again in order to experience those varieties. So Prithu Maharaj, he was showing us as a perfect example how to get our house in order. He closed up shop. He gave over his kingdom to his successors. He was not holding back. He was not saying, no, it didn't happen. I'm still in charge. I'm still the man. I can do it for another term. I can still do it. Because it says, Panchashordvan Varam Vrajet, that at the age of 50, one should become detached and one should move towards the forest. Now, I know most of us are already past the 50 mark, at least in this group here, and it's quite interesting to see. I mean, why at 50? Because at 50 you have so much experience, you have so many connections, you have so much knowledge, and there's still the ability to do something. But why should we become more detached at the age of 50? Because the goal of life is not just to get more things done or to enjoy a successful career or life in this world, but the goal of the human form of life is Ante Narayana Smriti. The goal is really to remember Krishna at the end of our life. As it is stated in this beautiful verse in the second canto, in the first chapter, text number 6, Etavan Sanka Yoga Byam Svadharma Parinishtaya Janmalava Parakumsam Ante Narayana Smriti. The highest perfection of human life, achieved either by complete knowledge of matter and spirit, by practice of mystic powers, or by perfect discharge of occupational duty, is to remember the personality of Godhead at the end of life. But how can I remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead at the end of life if I still have unfinished plans, if I still have to-do lists, if I still have my ledger, my book, where I keep very close count of all the plus and minuses of what has transpired in my life? So I was just reading this morning in Kapila Dev's instructions to his mother Devahuti in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavatam. This is 26th chapter, Fundamental Principles of Material Nature, in text 72, which is the last verse of the chapter, in the last paragraph. Srila Prabhupada says something very beautiful, that in the Bhagavatam, in the first canto, it is stated that one becomes joyful by discharging devotional service. In that joyful attitude, one can understand the science of God or Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, it is not possible. Would you like me to repeat that? in that joyful attitude, one can understand the signs of God or Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, it is not possible. In other words, if I'm not joyful in my practice of Krishna consciousness, then I have not actually really achieved the goal. I have not really become aware of this science of God. So what is holding me back? It is my mistaken, false sense of identity that I can still control and enjoy something in this world. So how to give that up? We can give up those tendencies by developing a higher taste through the process of devotional service, through the process of selflessly trying to serve Krishna and all living entities, through the process of Harinam Sankirtan, of spreading the Sankirtan movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, to let go of these attachments and to not bear grudges, it really means that we have to develop this serenity to really become free from these attachments. Just like water in its original state, in its original consistency, it is always pure. But as soon as it mixes with the element of earth, then it becomes contaminated. In a similar way, original pure consciousness is always clear and free from distraction. But as soon as it enters into the material realm and it becomes tinged by the modes or tainted by the modes of material nature, then it becomes clouded. So to attain that original state of purity means that I have to associate myself with the Supreme Pure, with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that will help me to stay in that purified state. And how to do that is really through this process of Bhakti Yoga. By always being in constant touch, in constant communion with the Supreme Lord, through this process of hearing and chanting, so that happiness is actually not based on material incentives or circumstances, but that happiness is real happiness. It is it is spiritual happiness. In the Upadeshamrita, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami analyzes different sources of happiness. And he states that this happiness can be divided into three categories. Number one, happiness derived from material enjoyment. Number two, happiness derived by identifying oneself with Brahman, with the Supreme Brahman. And number three, happiness derived from Krishna consciousness. So just being happy alone doesn't do it, because one can say, oh, I'm happy about this, I'm happy about that, but how long does that happiness or that state actually last? Unless it is derived from Krishna consciousness. So he says that happiness derived from pure devotional service is the highest because it is eternal. The happiness derived from material perfection or understanding oneself to be Brahman is inferior because it is temporary. There is no preventing one's falling down from material happiness, and there is even every chance of falling down from the spiritual happiness derived by identifying himself with the impersonal Brahman. So that again touches on the same verse from the Bhagavatam. And so we can see that the Acharyas, they are in agreement about these points. They never disagree on the principles and the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. So again, the topic is how to wrap up our business here in the material world by absorbing ourselves in true joyful state, in true happiness, through the practice of Krishna consciousness. That really means that I'm connecting myself through the process of devotional service, and I'm not trying to control and manipulate and enjoy other living entities. So when we go out and we share Krishna consciousness in the form of the holy name, form of Srila Prabhupada's books, in the form of Bhagavad Prasadam, we can see that this process actually gives us happiness. It actually gives us joyfulness. It is joyfully performed. Just a few days ago, I was in Houston, Texas, near a park, and I approached a well-to-do lady in her Audi sports car, and as I was showing her the books, she was kind of emotional. So she said, "I'm so sad. I just want to cry. I just want to cry." And I told her, "It's okay. It's fine. You can cry. That's perfectly all right." She said, "Today I'm so sad. I just wanted to come here to this park and I just wanted to cry all day. But now you come and you give me these books." So she got the realization that she was in a hard place. She was in a difficult situation, but she cried out of desperation, but there's some sincerity there. And then somebody shows up and gives her one of Srila Prabhupada's books. So she took 4 books and she gave a good donation, and she could really appreciate that her crying, her calling had been answered. Shortly after that, I met an African-American young couple, and they looked not like your usual prospects. They were like the typical sports people. They were in sports dresses, out there jogging. And I showed them the Bhagavad Gita and the Science of Self-Realization. And they were holding the books and looking at them very fondly. And they told me something very interesting. They said, "You don't know how much we have been looking for this knowledge. You don't know how much we are interested in reading this and finding out more about these topics." So sometimes the tendency is that we become a little insular. We think that, yeah, I'm happy in my own bubble, or I'm happy in my own environment, or in my own little group, but we lose a little bit of touch with the outside world. And unfortunately, sometimes we also lose a little bit of compassion, of feeling the pain, the suffering of the living entities. If you want to feel the pain of the living entities, just do it to yourself and go into rush hour traffic one day. I don't know if there's too much rush hour traffic where you live, but I had to go to a dentist appointment in Houston and drive to the other side of town in the morning at 7 o'clock. And I got a good idea of what the living entity has to go through every given day of the week. So sometimes we forget that. And we think, why are people not appreciating me more? Or why am I not getting more recognition? Or why are people not answering my messages? Or why? So many questions. But the actual bottom line question should be, why am I not joyful? Why am I not blissful in Krishna consciousness? Because if I'm not blissful in Krishna consciousness, as Srila Prabhupada pointed out in the purport that we just read, then I have not really achieved the goal. I'm not really Krishna conscious, which means Ante Narayana Smriti will become very difficult. It will actually be almost impossible. So what are we trying to achieve? We're just trying to be happy in Krishna consciousness. And the happiness comes from satisfying Krishna, from satisfying the spiritual master. Yasya prasada bhagava prasado, yasya prasadam nagati kutopi. As Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur commented in, he said that the pleasure of the spiritual master is the active principle in spiritual life. So Srila Prabhupada has given us this beautiful ISKCON society and the association of devotees, and so many varied ways how we can practice and share Krishna consciousness. If I cannot take joy in that and value that, and if I still hold grudges and still feel that everyone is out to get me or people are not really appreciating me, then I will have to come back to enjoy my 5 minutes of fame in this material world. Everybody gets their 5 minutes of fame. I can guarantee you that. I had mine already early on in the 80s and 90s, which is many decades ago. And I didn't even know that it had happened when all of a sudden they said, oh, you've been number one in Book Distribution in 91. And then it already happened, and you don't even know that it happened. And it doesn't really mean anything to you because you're so absorbed in service. But when we try to get recognition, it is such a futile struggle. It is so self-defeating. I was just with my old friend Sarvabhauma Prabhu, who lives in Houston, and in 1966, 2 years before I was born, he was California state champion wrestler in high school. Out of 700 schools, he was the number one wrestler, top dog. And he was describing how in his last final match, he had an out-of-body experience. It was kind of surreal how he was feeling that he was outside of his body, observing himself wrestling with this other person and doing all the moves and winning the game. And then the most surreal experience happened for him, that after he won the match and he declared the champion, everybody came and jumped on the platform, and they were all slapping him on the back and applauding. And he said, and I felt absolutely nothing. And so that really crushed his dream. That really crushed his aspiration that there was anything here that would really give him happiness, because he had achieved the top of his goals and it was just meaningless. So let us not waste our time to try to climb mountains that are not worthwhile climbing, or to again revisit our 5 minutes of fame, or to have our moments of success in this world, because anything that really is of value and that really matters in this world is, can I do something to please Prabhupada? Can I do something to give pleasure to the spiritual master? Because that is what is actually meaningful, and that is what is lasting, and that is what will attract Krishna's attention. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur often said that don't try to see God, but try to act in such a way that God wants to see you. So how do we bring our house in order? How do we actually preserve the legacy that the acharyas have handed to us? We should ask ourselves, have I done my homework like Prithu? Have I trained and empowered other people to do what I'm doing now? Have I let go of all material attachments and plan making and scheming? And have I truly embraced the joyful state of happiness in Krishna consciousness, so that at the end of life I can truly say I have no desires, like Srila Prabhupada. He said, I have no desires. He was completely at peace and fully happy in Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna. So we have time for comments and questions.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for the lecture. And I unmuted everybody.
So what do you think when Prabhu's talked about the Buddhist, and he says that by following Buddha, they will attain nirvana. So we generally understand by following Buddha, there's some sort of voidistic goal. What do you think the nirvana is that Prabhupada's speaking of?
Well, nirvana means just being freed from, nirvana. Nir means the negation, getting free from the forest of material, experience. But again, that's a very fine line, because it doesn't really mean that you achieve the spiritual world. It just means you're free from suffering. You become free from the bodily identification. So that's nirvana. But it doesn't give you shelter in the spiritual domain.
And there's no joy there either. It's just...
No, because if I say I'm free from suffering, like, when I was sitting on the dentist chair and they were cleaning my teeth and taking that hook, and going into all the crevices, it was painful. But then when that stopped, there is no real enjoyment. The pain stopped. That's all there is. Then what's next?
I like it's so much Prabhupada is pointing out in his books the suffering that goes on within this material world, described in so many different ways: birth, death, old age, and disease, birth, growth, duration, transformation, deterioration, and death, the threefold miseries, the sixfold miseries. What is that?
Ma.
Yeah, that's it. That's another one, right? The Vargas.
Apavarga.
Hunger, thirst, lamentation, old age, illusion, and death. Those are the six.
Yep.
The 6 whips. The 6 whips.
Yeah.
I was actually reading. I was reading those six whips the other day. Prabhupada was mentioning it. I was thinking there's a 7th one I didn't see on there. I was quite tired at the time I read that. I needed a nap, and I was thinking that exhaustion should be on there.
Yeah.
Hunger, thirst, lamentation, old age, illusion, and death. So sometimes you just come exhausted, and that seems
absolutely.
It seems like that could be on the list of whips. There's probably unlimited whips. But Prabhupada spends a lot of time in his teachings to convince us, to make us aware, to educate us of the miseries, how pervaded at every turn, at every step, the miseries are there. It's just, they're so omnipresent. There's no question of escaping them. No fame. There's no wealth, no recognition. There's nothing in this world that can stop those miseries. And that's if through that process of Buddhism, just stopping the miseries. That's
it doesn't do it. No. Thank you so much for sharing that, Hare Krishna.
No, I missed a part of the class, but in the purport of that you just read, could you see? Does the word nirvana come up?
Yes.
Yeah.
Could you read what does Prabhupada give as the? Is there word for word there?
No, in the purport it just says, Lord Buddha did not give any information about the soul, but if one follows his instructions strictly, he will ultimately become free from the material coverings and attain nirvana.
Because especially there's 2 verses in Gita 5:25 and 6 where nirvana, it might be another place, but especially these 2. And Prabhupada defines, in other words, it could be the Buddhists, they have co-opted this word, nirvana, because the way Krishna uses it and the way Prabhupada gives us the explanation, he says, labante brahma nirvana, labante Brahmanirvanam, Rishya, Shina Kalmasa, like that. And this is 525. So Prabhupada says, Labhante achieves Brahmanirvanam, liberation in the Supreme, those who are active within, the Rishyas, Shina Kalmasa, and they're devoid of all sins. So the translation basically, those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubt, whose minds are engaged within, always working, busy working for the welfare of all living beings who are free from all sins, achieve nirvana in the Supreme, liberation in the Supreme. Those 5 words or 4 words are the definition of nirvana. And then purport, first thing Prabhupada says, only a person who is fully in Krishna consciousness can be said to be engaged in the welfare work of all living entities. So Prabhupada's making it very different definition of nirvana here. The whole purport.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely different definition of nirvana. But this here nirvana is related to Buddha's teachings, not to what Krishna says in the Gita, to what you just read.
I'm just saying they have taken that. Just like if you go, there's Buddhist temples near in Narhar, they all know it. There's many Buddhist temples just near the Hawaii Temple, Honolulu Temple, and the one down the hill where devotees sometimes go and even chant. It is a much more devotional type of. Some of them are Zen. They're just completely. They say no visitors. But anyway, that particular one, they offer fruits, they offer incense.
Oh yeah.
They have pictures of demigods, and they have names similar to what we use, Brahma, Kali, like that. So they have certain things, but they tweak them, But this original word, we should at least understand that they've tweaked and co-opted the terminologies, and then we can explain it to them. And then, there's a big explanation in the Majja Leela, chapter 3 or 4, where 4 or 5, where Lord Chaitanya argue with the Buddhist, and the guy, he got his head whacked by the plate. And Bhaktisiddhanta gave 9 different, Bhaktisiddhanta gave 9 different aspects, arguments, or precepts that they have, and they're all smashed, And that purport, everyone should become familiar with it, because, or else we may end up getting a plate, also dropped on our head or something.
Yeah, but not a plate of maha, not a plate of maha, not a plate of maha.
They tried to give Lord Chaitanya something with meat or some garbage. I mean, who were they thinking? I mean, they need to really get their act together. They did. They had to. So he played the ultimate trick, where the disciples initiated the guru. They said, "What should we do? Our guru's out cold. We don't know what to do. We just chant Hare Krishna."
Chant the mantra, yeah.
Anyway, I remember when Bardra was doing that painting, great painting.
Yeah, great theme. Beautiful.
So they have co-opted so many things. They just like Ardha Kukuti Nyaya, where they're taking half the hand. Well, we like this idea of nirvana, but we don't really want to do any seva. So we're going to say that nirvana is just negation, but there's nothing positive. They take half-hand logic. We like the part that this part, but we don't like the other part. So like some yoga groups, they only give you certain verses from the Gita that they will enforce their impersonal idea. But we like this part of the Gita. That's okay.
Thank you, Pushkar Prabhu. Any other topics or questions?
Pushkar Prabhu, he mentioned about nirvana in the Supreme. Also, that his interest is just not the words nirvana by itself. It's connect with the Supreme. So let's make a difference there as well.
Yeah, Prabhupada gives all that. So if you were a Mayavadi reading that shloka without any explanation from the Parampara, then you could take that out of context and, go with your Buddhist philosophy, or as Kaviraj Goswami says, Bodha Hoita Nastik, Nastikavad Veda Shraya, Bodhake Adik, that the impersonal Shankaracharya philosophy is actually worse than the Buddhist, because Veda Shraya Nastikavad, they have taken shelter of the Vedas. It's like Shankaracharya he drove the Buddhists out, with his philosophy, but he introduced Vedas into India for several thousand years. I don't know how long it was that they had, a lot of them had adopted Buddhism. But Kaviraj Goswami says, following in Lord Chaitanya's footsteps, that this is covered Buddhism. Prachanam bodham uchate. Lord Chaitanya quoted those verses to the what's his name, Prakashananda, the Mayavadi sannyasi, and he convinced him, proved that from quoting from Puranas how Lord Shiva, but they don't accept this in other Vaishnava Sampradayas, that Shankaracharya is an incarnation of Shiva, Agya Kori Das, that he's a servant of simply carrying out. They take him as a big demon. They hate Shankaracharya. They spit at. If his name is spoken, they immediately spit. Literally, I mean, the Madhvas especially, they won't accept Lord Chaitanya's version for some reason. Of course, they don't accept so many things we accept. But that's there given. All three verses are quoted in the 3 or 4 verses. In CC, you can read it where Lord Chaitanya was quoting those verses.
I have a question. In the purport, when Srila Prabhupada is mentioning about 99.999% fall down from the Brahmajyoti, there's a slight chance that they may be promoted to Vaikuntha. Is there any stories or anything we know about?
Those are the Brahmavadis and not the Mayavadis. Those are the ones who are just, like the 4 Kumars. Tasya Ravinda Nainasya Pada Ravinda Kinjal Kamishra Turti Makarandarvayu. When they smell Tanavo. So when the breeze of the tulsi leaves, of the lotus feet, of the Supreme Personality Godhead entered the nostrils of the Kumars, even though they were already fixed in Brahman realization, they experienced a change in both body and mind. And, their bhakti blossomed. So they upgraded their consciousness. Why? What was the discerning factor that differentiates them from the other 99.9%? They were not envious. That's why Mayavadis are envious. They're offenders. And how does that enviousness show? Actually, they're spiteful. They're so envious that they not only ruin it for themselves, they want to ruin it for everybody else. So that's their maliciousness. And because of that offensiveness, they're actually the worst of offenders, as Pushkar Prabhu was beautifully giving us all these verses and different quotes from the CC. So we have to make sure that we can eradicate from our own heart envy and spitefulness, because sometimes that tendency may come into our own hearts, that, I can't do something, but no one else can do it, or no one else should do it. And then we try to ruin it for others. Okay, I can't be president, so let no one be president. Or let me just burn the crops, or blow up the bridges, or, So that's just a very unfortunate mindset. The natives here had this concept of 7 generations, that whatever we do, we should consider how will it impact the next 7 generations, not just what's expedient or what's enjoyable for me. So, that 0.1% are the ones who are not envious. They just had a Brahman realization, but they're looking for higher. So then they will move up to Paramatma and Bhagavan realization.
Like
but it's a very, very small fraction.
Sukadeva Goswami also same example.
Lilaya. He says it's in 2:1. Parinistitopi means I was situated in Nirgunya, beyond the modes of nature. But still, when I heard the delineation of the pastimes, he was in the womb. Then he he got out of the womb and he took off, and his father went running after him. Then you have to loop back to the first verses in the second chapter of the first canto, where Yam Pravajantam Anopetam, or he went off without any reformatory measure, and his father, Taravod Binidu's, only thing that you could hear was the echo of the trees. I mean, because he just took off.
These are obvious examples of Shukadeva Goswami and the four Kumaras. Yes, we know about these, but it would seem from the purport that what Srila Prabhupada is talking about is that those have actually merged into the Brahman effulgence. In other words, they don't have a material body even. They've merged into Brahman. That's what their goal was, and they did that. So the Kumaras and Shukadeva Goswami didn't actually merge. They had realization. But am I wrong here?
Well, Lord Chaitanya describes this to Sanatana Goswami in so many detailed. When he's describing the Atmarama verse, he describes detail like the mumukshubis who desire. There's different ones who want to merge with the body of Krishna, those who want to merge with the effulgence of Krishna, those who have already merged. These are some of the definitions, the 64 or so many definitions he gave Sanatana Goswami. So there are persons who merge, but I think it's described there that those who want to merge with the body are considered more unfortunate than those who want to merge just with the effulgence. So whether or not because then you go back to the 12th chapter in the beginning where Arjuna says, so tell me again, who's better, those who want to surrender to Krishna, to you directly, or those who go by the impersonal way? Then Krishna goes through the thing again and says, after many births of, like it mentions in this Gita, 5th chapter purports, of doing good, sarvabhuta hite rata, engaged in doing welfare activities, te prapnuvanti mameva, then he attains me. So somehow or other it seems like you have to come back and just do things in the actual material world, not just be merged. Because it does say, what's better, to worship? And he says it creates more trouble. Kleshodikatarastesham avyakta. So those who are sakta, attached to the avyakta shakta, nice term, chetasam, their consciousness is just attached to that which is unmanifest. Advancement is very hard. He says, don't bother, don't go there. So that's all we need to know, whether or not there's 1 billion percentage who might make it through. But, so, yeah. Kleshodikatar vyakta shakta chetasam avyakto hi gatir dukam dehavid. For those who are unembodied, is just don't go there, don't bother with it. So if you want to try for that, like 0.1%, try it. They've been trying, but Ariya Krishna Param Padam Tatak Patantyadho, they have to come back. That's what that prayer says. Is that one of Brahma's prayers or so? Or is that one of the ones for the I think of the Garbhastuti in 10.2? I can't remember where that one. Aruya Krishna Parampadam Tatak. They go to the Parampadam. They've already gone to the Parampadam, but then they've come down. This is 10th canto. So yeah, I don't know how many people make a squeak through there. It's like after those doors. What do you call it? Those turning doors, revolving door. When you try to squeak through after it's already pressed through, you're stuck. You could suffocate.
Yeah, thank you, Pushkar Prabhu. Especially like at the end of the purport, Prabhupada, he makes this statement here that in the absence of varieties of enjoyment, the spirit soul gradually feels an attraction to enjoy a life of bliss. And not having any information of Krishna Loka or Vaikuntha Loka, he naturally falls down to material activities in order to enjoy material varieties. So the fall down comes natural. It's a natural consequence. So not advised, but he's just, for the sake of completeness, he's giving us the 0.1% to show, it is an option, but don't count on it, Don't bank on that one. Any other points or comments or questions?
There are exceptions to every rule.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hare Krishna, that was beautiful comments from everyone. But the question I have here is that wouldn't that depend in who your spiritual master is, who is leading you into Krishna consciousness or God consciousness? Isn't the spiritual master or the important pivotal point by which you can get there? I mean, it's not like you can just go and say, okay, I'm going to go to Krishna Loka, I'm going to chant 64 rounds and I'm going to get there. Well, you may have those nice feelings and desires, but ultimately, unless you have a spiritual master that leads you there, I don't see how you can get there. What do you think?
Yeah, naturally, we have to follow the system that Krishna has established. And so he has stated how he wants to be approached and what is the process. And therefore, we're following Guru Parampara. But Guru Parampara is not a personality cult. It is a transcendental system of Guru Parampara. So the principle of Guru Tattva, is very clear. So we have to understand that. And the only way we can appreciate spiritual master is through the ear, is by hearing his instructions. Oftentimes people get mesmerized by the physical form or by the apparent. But actually only through the ear can we recognize Guru. And it has to be in line. Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, they have to be in line. So once we follow those instructions, then by their grace, we can achieve whatever destination that is bestowed upon us, so to speak. It's not like we are, as you said, we're storming our way into into these higher realms, because that's not the way how we can enter there.
Regarding there's always exceptions. I don't know if that's always true. Like, for example, Krishna says, Jatasihi Dhruva Mature, Dhruvan Drama Mritasya Cha. Dhruva means, it is a fact. That there's, for one who was born, death is certain. For one who is dead, birth is certain. Within this material world, there's no exceptions.
Unless you become deathless by the mercy of the Lord.
Yeah, that's true.
You're an exception.
All right, you beat me. Okay. I accept defeat on that.
Other topics or questions or comments?
I think you covered it really well. Thank you, Prabhu. Great class.
Well, Pushkar did all the work, I'm just setting it up for him. It's called teamwork, You do the pass and then someone does the slam dunk. Okay, thank you all for your kind participation and churning the nectar of the Bhagavatam. It's always, for me, a humbling experience to have to step up to the plate. And thank you for including me in your prayers. All goes to Srila Prabhupada, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai,
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you so much.